Happy October, everyone. Nikki here from Nikki Loves Books. Thank you all so much for joining me today. I do have a book review that I'm very excited to be telling you guys all about. Yes, it is October, and I wanted to dedicate all my October book reviews to either books that were mystery and like horror-based, like The Depths, or something to do with other Halloween themes like witches and vampires. But I really couldn't help myself. I really wanted to do this book review to tell you guys all about this fantastic book because I absolutely loved it. Nothing I reveal today should be anything that you wouldn't be able to gather from like the Goodreads summary, the back of the book, or inside the book flap. So the amazing book we're going over today is A Broken Blade by Melissa Blair. So this is the first book in the Halfling saga. This was the book for the young adult July bookish box, and I'm so freaking happy that I got this. One, it's beautiful. If you guys want to see all the details about this beautiful edition, check out my bookish box unboxing video linked in the description. Not only did I love the way this book looked, especially my special edition, but everything about this book was right up my alley, and I cannot believe I did not know about this book sooner. I am so happy Bookish Box did this book. I gave A Broken Blade by Melissa Blair an 8 out of 10 stars, which is really damn good for me. So it is safe to say that I really liked this book, and I'm pretty sure I stayed up late trying to get it all read in one night. Had to do like the typical adulting where I had to be like, all right, I have to put it down because I have work. Hate adulting. I swear to God, the way my life is I just feel like life gets in the way of me reading. That's all I want to do. I want to read and review books for y'all. So before we jump into the 8 things that I liked about A Broken Blade, we are going to go over a brief summary of what the heck A Broken Blade is about. Trained as a Shade, a lethal order of assassins used specifically for the crown, Kira is the deadliest of them all, known to most only as the King's Blade. So when the Shadow begins disrupting things in the kingdom and makes a mockery of the order, it is only fitting that the blade is sent after him. But the closer Kira gets to the Shadow, the closer he is to discovering her own secrets, and the stakes become even higher in their deadly game. As enemies become allies and allies become enemies, Kira no longer knows if she's the hunter or the prey. Ultimately, she must decide to step out into the light to take down the king, or to continue to remain in the shadows, killing her own kind. Now that we have a little bit of a background of what A Broken Blade is, let's go ahead and go into the details of the 8 things that I enjoyed about it. The very first thing that I liked about A Broken Blade is actually the plot. So you have your badass female protagonist sent on a mission that becomes a cat and mouse game. This mission takes our protagonist to different locations, so us as readers get to experience different places and of course different races, which we'll be talking about that in just a moment. Along the way of the twists and turns of this mission, we also get to meet some very eccentric but lovable side characters as well. This brings us into the second thing that I really liked about A Broken Blade, and that is the world. So A Broken Blade is a fantasy novel, and so the world is fantasy-based. So we are in a land that has mortals, so humans, but also fae and elves. And it is really important to distinguish elves and fae. So not all fae are elves, but all elves are fae. So elves specifically in A Broken Blade are fae that do not have magic. And then as we do read, we also find out that there are 2 different types of fae. So there are dark fae and light fae. So the crown recognizes mortals and dark fae as citizens. Elves, we find out, were hunted down by the crown. And those that were left behind, the halflings. So these are people with mortal and elvish bloodlines. The halflings are now slaves to the crown. I think it's a lot of fun when fantasy books do different races. It can make the book so much more interesting and intriguing because you could have very different political climates that way. And in A Broken Blade, obviously, there is slavery and colonialism, which we'll be talking about a little bit later in this book review. And the Feylands was a nice addition to be able to experience in A Broken Blade as Kira was on her mission. Number 3 is actually pacing. This book had fantastic pacing. I never ever felt like the book was dull, was dragging on. It just kept going, and it really kept my interest. A Broken Blade definitely has some action pieces, you know, people definitely fighting. Obviously, our main female protagonist is an assassin. I never felt like there was anything useless. Like, I didn't feel like there was fluff in this book. Like, I just felt that the book was just continuously moving. I just really enjoyed the pacing of this book because I just felt like it was nonstop. And I think that was one of the reasons why it was so hard to put down, because every time I ended a chapter, I was like, oh no, but I need to know, does this work out okay? The pacing in this book overall was just a nice balance of moving forward, but not rushing. Like, I didn't feel like the book was just like, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. It was well done. So there was dialogue, there was character development, and then there was just constant of let's move forward with what we're actually focused on in this book. So the fourth thing that I liked about A Broken Blade was actually our female protagonist. Like, go figure. So lovely Miss Kira is our very badass female protagonist, our badass deadly assassin, who reminds me awfully like someone else that we'll be talking about in just a second. And I think while I describe her, some of you all might be picking up on who I mean. Kira is so enjoyable. She is snarky, irreverent, but has a very soft interior that, of course, she is trying to hide by being snarky, irreverent, and just kind of moody. As well as being a prickly bitch, she also is fairly smart. Even though she doesn't like certain people, she's not stupid enough to portray that in person, because she knows it's probably not going to be her life that pays for her disrespect. She is smart, proves to be extremely cunning, and is also extremely protective of those that she does actually care about, even though they are few and far between. The other great thing about Kira is that she's not this perfect protagonist. So she does do things that, of course, as readers we won't like, other characters obviously don't like, but more importantly, she doesn't like. So there are things that she does that she absolutely just hates herself for, and she doesn't manage that self-hatred in a healthy manner. Obviously, having any sort of self-hatred is unhealthy. Like, you should not hate yourself. Even if you made a mistake, we all do it. You do need to find acceptance. I do appreciate the fact that Kira does hate herself, and we actually see her act out that self-hatred in ways that we would see it in real life for us. Again, it's not healthy. We'll be talking about it a little bit later in this book review. Overall, Kira's character was very enjoyable and believable. She has both good qualities and bad qualities. So yes, I love myself some Kira. She's a prickly bitch with a lot of heart. I do want to talk about one thing that I did not like about A Broken Blade, and that is the resemblance to another book character. And it's a strong resemblance. If you guys did not put it together from my book summary and the first 4 things that we talked about, especially Kira's personality, is there seemed to be a lot of influence from Throne of Glass. So Kira's character does seem to be almost cookie cutter based off of Selena Sardathian. You have that assassin element, you have that self-hatred, you have that very prickly attitude of, I don't give a shit about anyone else but me. I'm going to do what I'm told because it's in my best interest. I'm being told to hunt down my own kind. I work for the man who killed my people. There's just one resemblance after the other. The list of similarities can go on and on. Now, do I feel like A Broken Blade was a retelling of Throne of Glass? Absolutely not. There are enough differences where it did feel like a different book. I just felt like Kira really was almost a copycat of Selena, and her backstory was very similar. Did I not enjoy A Broken Blade because of this resemblance to A Throne of Glass? Absolutely not. I still gave A Broken Blade 8 out of 10 stars. I still enjoyed the heck out of it. I will admit, though, there was a few times where I was reading the book and I was getting a little annoyed just because it was too similar. Again, in character, not to the overall plot to the book, but Kira is just so similar to Selena that, you know, my brain was a little bit like, did you straight up copy Selena, or is this a fan fiction? But again, overall, A Broken Blade is still a very good book. It's very well written. I'm still very happy I read it. So let's get back into the last 4 things that I enjoyed about A Broken Blade. The 5th thing that I liked about A Broken Blade, and we'll see if I can say this word again, is colonialism. That is a very hard word for me to say. I've always struggled with words that have multiple of the same letter at different spaces in a word, like colonialism, aluminum, cinnamon. Yeah, for some reason, my tongue cannot like wrap around those very easily. So colonialism. Again, this is not because I'm like, oh yay, colonialism. No. So no, we are not saying yay to colonialism. Colonialism is very bad. So if you guys do not know what colonialism is, you might have heard the word and not really know exactly what the definition is. So colonialism is policy or practice of politically controlling another country, so either fully or partially, so political control of another country, in which you then place settlers into that country to occupy it, and then exploiting the country. If you need prime examples of this happening in real life, please look at any country that white people have invaded. Britain is the prime example of colonialism, but do not forget that Germany, France, Spain, you name it, all those white countries, they were involved too. None of them can claim that they did not do this at some point in history. So why am I giving y'all a history lesson in a book review? There are reasons. Colonialism was an underlining theme in A Broken Blade, and it makes a lot of sense when you find out that the author is actually Native herself, because this is something that her ancestors dealt with and are still dealing with. So we see colonialism in A Broken Blade, and it is rampant. So the elements that we see of colonialism is obviously the mortals have taken over this area that used to be the Feylands. The mortals have hunted down elves to extinction. Anyone of elven descent are now slaves, and the kingdom is financed, whole economy is based on selling magic from the very people that they conquered. Another important theme that is brought up in A Broken Blade is actually addiction, specifically alcoholism. So I actually was really not expecting this one. However, it makes sense with the character, which is why I thought it was great that it was included. I liked the fact that A Broken Blade has this underlining theme of alcoholism because it is an important issue for us here in the real world. I'm also unsure if the author included this because I do know alcoholism is very rampant in the Native community. I don't know if that was a personal touch for her. I think it's important to have stories that people can relate to. So we do see a character deal with alcoholism, and then the very important thing that A Broken Blade includes is that you do see that recovery piece. So you do see a character start on the recovery journey to give up their addiction, which is very important because we do want people to remember there is hope. Just because you're addicted doesn't mean that you're a lost cause. There are ways to overcome addiction. Because Broken Blade does talk about some heavy themes, there is a trigger warning in this book that I'm just going to let you all know about, simply so you can make the best decision possible about whether you want to read it or not. Content warning. This book is a fantasy romance that explores themes of alcoholism, addiction, colonialism, depression, and systemic violence. While it is not the focus of this book or depicted graphically on the page, Some content may be triggering for readers who have experienced self-harm, assault, depression, or suicidal ideation. Please read with care. Going on a side tangent on trigger warnings, I did appreciate that this book had trigger warnings in it. I personally don't think it should be mandatory that books have trigger warnings. However, trigger warnings can be helpful for some book readers. I am entirely in the opinion that your triggers are your own. You're responsible for managing them and dealing with them, not the rest of the world. So when it comes to books, trigger warnings can be very helpful in that sense of you can make the decision, oh, that's one of my triggers. I'm not ready to read a book about that yet. I'm going to pass on this book. All right, moving on to number 7. Number 7 is enemies to lovers. So, of course, romance, my Achilles heel. A Broken Blade does have a undercurrent of a romance story, and it is enemies to lovers. Enemies to lovers is probably my favorite trope of all time. I'm so happy A Broken Blade has it. I am curious now, do you guys all have a favorite trope? Like, is there a trope that you're like, dude, if that's in a book, I am there. I would really like to know. What is your favorite book trope? Or favorites? If you can't pick one, that's cool. You can just list out favorites. I would definitely say my favorite is enemies to lovers. I even, to be perfectly honest, I even think I like the love triangle. And I don't want to necessarily say that I like the love triangle because of the drama. That's what I dislike the most about the love triangle trope. I think what it is that because then it keeps me curious of like, who is this person going to end up with? And I get nervous because I, of course, have a favorite. I have the character that I think the character should be with. And so I'm like reading this book being like, they better end up together. Like, this better be a thing. And there is that investment when it is a love triangle of I end up picking my favorite couple, and then anytime the middle character is hitting up that third wheel, I'm just like, no, leave it alone. And then of course I get worried. And then I'm just like, shit, are they gonna end up with that person? I don't want them with that person. I'm sorry. It's like Twilight. I didn't want Bella to end up with Jacob. Jacob was not meant for her. She was meant with Edward. And then obviously it was because Bella and Edward got together that Jacob was able to find his person. But I'm like, if Bella and Edward didn't end up together, then Jacob would be effed. And then part of me is always like, but what if Bella and Jacob did get together? They had a kid and that kid imprinted on Edward. Like, how freaking weird would that be? Anyways, I digress. So enemies to lovers, I would like to know what your favorite book trope is. I'm really, really curious. Let's go ahead and move on to number 8. Number 8 is that there's a sequel, A Shadow Crown. So thank goodness A Broken Blade is a series. And so we get to see our lovely characters again. And the current date listed on Goodreads is April 4th in 2023. Not too far away. We're a little less than 6 months away from the sequel dropping. I have no idea if the book is supposed to go beyond that. All I know is that there is a sequel. It's called A Shadow Crown. It comes out supposedly April 4th, 2023, which thankfully again is less than 6 months. And that's all the information I got. But I'm super excited because I cannot wait to hear more about the Blade and the Shadow. And that is it of our book review of A Broken Blade. Thank you all so much for being here. Please let me know if you're going to end up picking up this book. If you have read it, what are your thoughts? And please let me know what your favorite book tropes are. Before you leave, don't forget to hit that like button. And to join me next time, make sure you're subscribed.